Imagine you are standing in the middle of a forest on a clear sunny day with dozens of people around you, perfect visibility and absolute safety. And suddenly, in just seconds, a man disappears without a trace. No screams, no trace, no explanation. Two seasoned rangers in different parts of America in perfect weather, in the safest of places, just vaporized off the face of the earth. What happened to them? How does one disappear in front of their colleagues and hundreds of hikers? Today we'll look at the most mysterious and unexplained disappearances in the history of Virginia's forests, which will give even the most hardened skeptics goosebumps. Ranger Danny Lee, only 37 years old, was considered one of the most responsible and experienced conservation officers in Bedford County, Virginia. Tall, trim, and with a friendly smile, he was known for always helping hikers, knew all the surrounding trails by heart, and could come to the rescue of the lost at any time. Colleagues and superiors appreciated his combination of professionalism and calmness, and Danny himself in his spare time loved to tell stories about nature to children who came on excursions. No one could have guessed that he, a man who risked his life daily for the safety of others, would suddenly disappear under near-perfect conditions in a place where it seemed almost impossible to disappear. It happened on May 12, 2012, when the weather was truly exemplary. A warm and sunny day, temperature about plus 25 degrees C, almost cloudless sky, a light breeze in the crowns of trees. Visibility was excellent, no fog, no threat of thunderstorms or rain. A normal spring day, which many tourists and locals found to be the best time to walk in the forest and nearby hills. As per their routine, Danny and two other rangers, Scott Martin and Jessica O'Brien, were near a small observation station located in the George Washington and Jefferson National Forest, which in itself is common in Virginia, about 40 minutes from the nearest town. They had a few routine tasks: check the condition of the observation tower, survey the adjacent forest trails, and respond to calls from hikers if necessary. The latter, however, were not complaining that day. Everything was quiet and peaceful. The observation tower was located on one of the hills. It was a relatively simple metal structure built a couple decades ago. A small platform at the top, with a steep ladder leading up to it, and several flights of stairs along the way. The rangers usually went up there to monitor possible forest fires or to spot anything unusual within a few kilometers. Since it was a clear day, Danny Lee decided to do a quick inspection. Check to see if the anchorages were in order, if the wooden steps were rotted, if any repairs were needed. Scott and Jessica, meanwhile, were sorting out paperwork in the station itself, which stood 50 meters from the tower. Under normal circumstances, such a job would take half an hour, no more. He went up to the site, inspected the screws and bolts, checked for corrosion, wrote down the results, and that was it. According to his co-workers, Danny was lively, cheerful, completely calm. At 11:10 a.m., they joked around before going their separate ways. Scott asked Danny to honk his walkie-talkie if he needed help with any repairs. Danny replied, "No problem, I'll be in touch," and disappeared behind the trees leading to the trail to the tower. No one paid attention to the fact that it was completely silent at that moment. Silence in nature itself is not uncommon. But that silence would soon become part of the most mysterious story surrounding the ranger's disappearance. The last person to see Danny Lee was essentially Scott himself, peering out of the station door a few minutes later. He remembers Danny standing at the foot of the tower and looking up. The distance was about 30 meters, but the visibility was perfect. Danny was wearing his standard ranger uniform, green pants, a lightweight shirt with park insignia and a cap, and a walkie-talkie hanging from his belt. Afterwards, Scott averted his eyes for just a second as Jessica approached him with a question about his ID. When he looked back, half a minute later, no one was there. His first thought was simple. Danny had probably gone up to the tower. Scott continued his dialogue with Jessica, not paying much attention to the fact that it had all happened so fast. The trouble started about 10 or 15 minutes later when Jessica went to the tower to hand Danny some papers. When she got to the stairs, she called his name, but there was no response. And the strange thing was, there were no footsteps, no clatter of boots on metal steps, no sounds, typical of a person walking on this structure. She went up to the platform, looked around, there was nobody there. and from the tower there was a wonderful view. The forest, the paths, the clearings. The day was clear. If the man was leaving the tower and walking toward the station, Jessica would have spotted him, or he would have come into Scott's line of sight, remaining by the building. But nothing. It was as if Danny had vanished. The only thing Jessica found was that at the very top, on the metal railing bar, lay the radio and the ranger's uniform shirt itself, neatly folded. More precisely, the shirt was folded as if the man had taken it off and put it aside. There was no other trace of it there. Puzzled, Jessica called out to Scott. He made a few circles around the tower, thinking that Danny might have moved literally a couple steps away to go to the bathroom or to check something in the bushes. But all the immediate area was well screened, and the ranger was nowhere to be found. Deciding that this was no joke or coincidence, they started calling for him on the radio, but there was no response. Danny's radio, however, was lying on the tower, turned off. There were 3 other radios left in the station, and on all 3 the communication was blank. No response. Even then, they sensed that something was wrong. Half an hour later, when it was clear that Danny hadn't returned, Scott and Jessica contacted their superiors and sounded the alarm. It is believed that if a ranger does not make contact for 20 minutes with clear communications and good weather, there may have been an accident. However, instead of finding a body or an injured colleague at the foot of the tower, rescuers and other rangers arriving an hour later found only emptiness. A large search and rescue operation unfolded right on that day. About 10 men quickly scoured all the surrounding trails. Several men climbed the tower and climbed down the ledges, looking for any possible falls. There was no blood, no broken branches, no indentations in the ground. A 2-kilometer radius around the area was examined in the evening. Also nothing. The next day, May 13th, volunteers from the local districts, canines, and police joined the case. They began to check the version. Could Danny voluntarily leave? Run away? But it seemed absurd. First of all, a ranger can't just take off his uniform during a shift because all his personal belongings, keys, phone, wallet, were in a locker at the station. Secondly, he was an extremely reliable man. His relatives said that he had no problems, no debts, no desire to disappear. And how could he pass by 2 colleagues unnoticed? If the place is almost entirely visible and there is no dense thicket nearby. The forest near the tower is sparse. The trees grow at some distance from each other. Plus, it's daytime clear light. Scott and Jessica literally looked every few seconds to see where Danny was. A minute and a half at most between the time he stood at the tower and the moment they realized he was gone. The search continued, expanding day by day. A helicopter was brought in to survey the area from the air, but the clear weather was only utilized for the first 24 hours, and then the rains came and made the task more difficult. Nevertheless, that first night, when everything was still relatively dry, thermal imaging cameras were working, scanning the forest around, but no human figure was found. The dogs, picking up the scent from that very shirt, circled around the tower and turned in different directions, but after a few steps, the trail disappeared somewhere. "It's like he flew into the air," said one of the dog handlers, amazed at the absence of any scent trail. Usually, even if a person tries to hide, a dog is able to pick up his trail. It would seem to suggest an accident. Danny may have slipped, fallen, or been hit by a structure somehow. But then, why was his shirt removed and carefully left on the railing? And most importantly, the body would have been lying nearby if he had fallen from the height of the tower. But no one found him at the bottom either. The traumatic scenario didn't check out. The criminal scenario also looked too fantastic. To kidnap an adult, strong man in the daytime, in front of his colleagues, and to do it in such a way that no one heard any sounds of struggle or screams. Besides, the nearest road was about 1.5 kilometers away, and it would be necessary to get Danny there without leaving any traces, and the ranger would probably fight back. Since May 14th, the search has taken on a truly massive character. Dozens of volunteers, rescue teams, Forest Service personnel, police officers, all came to find their missing comrade. They scoured every square meter of forest, field, beds of shallow streams, looked under fallen logs. They took up quadcopters, tried to scan the area around them. There were even stories on the news that a ranger disappeared at noon in perfect weather, leaving his own uniform on top of the tower. Journalists looked for any lead, but found none. Interviews with Danny's family confirmed that he had no tendencies toward dangerous behavior, no history of depression, no drinking, no health complaints. The authorities continued to stick to the official version. The man disappeared for unknown reasons. A search is underway. Quite quickly in the local community and among fans of mystery stories, Danny Lee's disappearance began to be categorized as a so-called sudden disappearance, in conditions where it is almost impossible to hide without a trace. Danny's co-workers, usually practical people, began to whisper that there had already been a couple of mysterious cases in some parts of the forest in recent years. A hiker went out for firewood and didn't return, even though the trail was short and clear, or a fisherman disappeared by the river when the water was calm. But then it could always be somehow logically explained. Currents, wild animals, bad weather. Here, everything pointed to the fact that Danny found himself in the easiest possible conditions. It was not night, not a snowstorm, no dangerous animals. And suddenly in seconds he was gone. A week later, when the active phase of the search ended in vain, more fantastic versions appeared. Something like, he stepped into another world, or he was carried away by aliens. Of course, the official police did not take it seriously, but mentioned in their reports that the absence of evidence is an extremely rare case. The only physical evidence was the shirt itself and the walkie-talkie left at the top of the tower. The forensics showed nothing suspicious on them. No foreign prints or traces of blood. The sleeves of the shirt were turned up, as if he'd taken it off quickly over his head, and the walkie-talkie was lying nearby, turned off. Why it was off is unclear. Danny usually kept it on in receive mode. Danny's family, of course, kept hoping he would be found. Maybe he was injured and had lost his memory. But 1 week followed the next, and there were no calls, no signals. Police checked hospitals in neighboring counties, asking if any undocumented patients showed up. Zero. By the end of May, the search and rescue efforts were canceled. No body, no living person, no trace. Months passed, but no progress was made. Scott and Jessica and all the rangers of the station were experiencing a psychological shock. Their friend, professional, respected person had disappeared. It was impossible to continue working without looking at the tower every time, without remembering how Danny Lee stood at the ladder on a clear day. A year later, the case remained open and hung in police databases under the heading Missing Unexplained Disappearance. The ranger's parents, his brother and ex-wife, insisted that the authorities keep up their periodic raids, but it was the same old story, no information. In June 2018, an event occurred that still perplexes Forest Service officials and the many hikers who know the McAfee Knob area. Ranger Adam Parker, a 32-year-old ranger, an experienced and respected employee who considered these areas a second home, suddenly disappeared in a complete sense. The day had been sunny since morning, with no hint of fog or weather anomalies. The temperature was plus 25 degrees C, the wind was light, and visibility was almost perfect. There was activity all along the route, with hikers climbing up to the famous cliff face to take memorable photos and rangers on their usual duty. Adam radioed in around noon, telling his colleagues that he wanted to go off to check out a strange sound coming from the forested area. A minute later, the radio went silent. At that moment, no one suspected trouble. There was no telling what kind of animal might have attracted the ranger's attention. However, when Adam stopped answering repeated calls, his colleagues immediately went to the site. What they found was astonishing. The tracks of the missing ranger had broken off in a clear clearing, and no further indication of where he might have gone. No obvious signs of a struggle, no signs of dragging or animal hunting, and no personal belongings of any kind around. Within hours, the entire county knew what had happened. Rescuers, volunteers, and loved ones of Adam Parker launched one of the most extensive manhunt operations in the area's history. But despite all efforts, the official investigation has hit a dead end. What really happened to the ranger, hailed as McAfee Knob's best guide, McAfee Knob is one of the most photographed points on the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. It offers spectacular views of mountain ranges and valleys. Thousands of hikers flock here every year, willing to hike several kilometers to take pictures on a cliff overhanging over the abyss. Although the route is not the easiest, it is quite accessible for hikers with basic physical fitness. It is quite busy during the daytime in summer, and sometimes you have to park far from the beginning of the trail because of the large flow of people. Rangers patrol the McAfee Knob area on a regular basis, as human error remains a major cause of accidents. Some people leave the trail to find an even more scenic spot. Others overestimate their strength and risk injury on rocky sections. However, 2018 was not marked by any extreme incidents until that very day in June when Adam disappeared. The weather was nearly flawless for hiking, and Forest Service reports showed that neither the hikers nor the rangers themselves had any signals of potential problems. Adam Parker was 32 years old. He had joined the service as a ranger 5 years ago, quickly becoming accustomed to the mountain landscape. Colleagues and acquaintances described him as a cheerful and friendly man who could find common ground with everyone from experienced hikers to families with children. Adam was an excellent mountain guide. He could give a tour with his eyes closed, having hiked the entire route of the Appalachian Trail himself many times. He had a history of success in search and rescue operations. He helped pull injured hikers out of crevasses, searched for lost hikers, and participated in training programs for beginners. There was nothing to indicate that Adam would leave his post unexpectedly or leave on his own. He loved his job, had plans for the future, and no conflicts or depressions were noticed by those close to him. According to his partners, he was in excellent physical shape and also coped well with stressful situations in the mountains. That's why the news of his sudden disappearance stirred everyone. If even such an experienced ranger couldn't resist something in the forest, what to say about tourists? According to the official logbook, Adam had taken an early morning shift. At 9 o'clock, he accompanied a small group of school children to the start of the trail, showing them basic safety rules. By 10 o'clock, he was back at the ranger station at the bottom, reporting that all was quiet. In the afternoon, Adam was seen by several hikers approaching the trail. He checked passes, gave advice on the route, and warned them to stay within the fenced area. Around noon, Adam radioed that he was going to see what strange noise was coming from the woods, like the cracking of twigs or a low growl. He didn't turn off the radio yet, but the connection started to break after a couple minutes. The last words that were picked up were indistinct. The ranger on duty at the station immediately tried to contact Parker but got no response. At first, no one sounded the alarm. There were times when the signal was lost due to terrain. But after 5 minutes with no response, and with clear weather, colleagues became concerned. When the two rangers arrived in that section of the forest, all they could see was a path leading to a small open clearing. Adam's boot prints were clearly imprinted in the damp soil, going straight to the middle of the clearing and then suddenly breaking off. It was as if he'd taken a couple more steps and disappeared. No broken branches, no sign of struggle, just a frightening emptiness. The colleagues immediately began searching the surrounding area, calling loudly for Adam, but hearing no response. There were no bloody footprints in the clearing, no personal effects. His walkie-talkie was also missing. One of the rangers raised the alarm at the station, and the rest of the staff, as well as a group of volunteer hikers, pulled up to the site. There was another hour of futile shouting and scouring of the nearby bushes. A detailed inspection showed that there were several animal tracks around the clearing, but no new human footprints were found. By 2 p.m., the situation had already attracted the attention of the management. The active phase of the search and rescue operation started immediately. According to the scheme worked out dozens of times, rangers divided into groups, which dispersed in all directions, navigating by map and compass. The clear weather aided the visual search. Any movement was far away, but the rangers had not encountered any sign of Adam or his potential captors. As far as is known, there were no reports of criminal activity that day, or strangers who might have gotten him into the car. In the afternoon, police officers from a nearby town, staff from neighboring parks, and even a few members of a National Guard unit, who had participated in the past in the search for missing people on the Appalachian Trail, drove up to the area. Drones came up and began circling over the forest, scanning the space. Visibility from the air in sunny weather was excellent, but the cameras didn't pick up anything like lying clothes, an injured person, or any atypical footprints. We also descended with quadcopters to the glades lower down the slopes. Again, no results. The sniffer dogs were led to the place where Adam had apparently left tracks, but the canines noted that the animals were behaving strangely. They'd pick up the ranger's scent as they approached the clearing, but then they'd spin around confused, not sure where the trail might have led next. "It's like the trail breaks off in the middle of nowhere," one of the cinematologists, Laurie Hughes, later told reporters. Already by evening 5, 6 squads of rescuers, volunteers, and police combed the surrounding area in a radius of several kilometers. Adam Parker has not been found. There were no signals from his radio either. Most likely it was either broken or turned off. Adam's relatives had by then arrived from a neighboring county, shocked by the news. They found it hard to believe that a grown, strong man, a professional, had disappeared during the day in a place usually full of people. Stories of such disappearances are not uncommon in large forested areas of the United States, but no disappearances of this magnitude have been reported around McAfee Knob. Media articles began to appear in which the case of Ranger Adam Parker was called a clear day mystery. After all, no one saw him leave, heard no screams or sounds of struggle. Mysticism and rumors of portals quickly surfaced in local conversations, as if the forest sometimes takes a person without a trace. Officials called for calm and continued the search. The next few days were devoted to a full-scale search of the area. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras were deployed. The weather remained clear at night, which made the task easier, but alas, they did not find the slightest heat spot corresponding to a human body. Several times, the rescuers repeated the routes, hoping that Adam might have lost his bearings, going in circles. However, he was too experienced to get lost like that, and he would surely have heard the search team's shouts. By the end of the first week after the disappearance, the police had no rational leads left. There were no belongings, no signs of fiddling, no witnesses who had seen a man with Adam's appearance off the trail. Hikers who were in the McAfee Knob area haven't said anything either. "We only heard helicopters and saw someone missing. Nobody knew where he went," said one eyewitness, Mark Boyd. More than 5 years after that June day, Adam Parker's case is still not officially closed. Police have only a missing in action, unexplained status. The Forest Service occasionally resumes partial search forays when new signals come in, but there are no results. Locals have long said that if even a seasoned ranger is missing in plain sight, then the average hiker in the mountains needs to be triple careful. What happened to Danny Lee and Adam Parker? Will these mysterious disappearances ever be solved? Write your versions in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to put a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next episodes. Take care and see you soon.